Let me start by this. OBJ is excused from practice. Excused from practice. Here's Baker Mayfield. He was asked if he was hurt by the video posted by Odell Beckham Jr.'s father.
Hurt? No. Surprised? Yes. Yeah, I think there's different things that play a factor into it. I've had conversations with his dad before, man to man, face to face, and I was pretty surprised by the video and the intentions and the feelings behind it. I'd be lying if I said otherwise, but hurt? No, I'm good.
Here's Mayfield on his relationship with Odell Beckham Jr.
I thought we had a very open line of communication going into it, so we'll see. Like I said, more surprised than anything, as everybody was. So we'll see going forward, and there's always room for improvement in any relationship, so we'll see.
Can you forgive Odell for this? Would you accept an apology?
Yeah, I think any sort of conversation would go a long way.
Mayfield on whether or not he would still play with OBJ.
I'm prepared to do whatever, and if he's back, then we'll work through it and do whatever it takes. I can put my ego and pride to the side to win, because that's all I care about is winning.
All I care about is winning. Now, John Johnson III, who's a free safety for the Browns, said that he believes the majority of the locker room wants Odell Beckham Jr. back in the locker room. I feel like the majority of the locker room would love to have him in this building flat out. That's what he said. Joel Bintano, longest tenured Brown, said the players know about as much as the media knows on the situation, but Johnson made it clear how he feels as well. Right? So, look, you're hearing the players be like, look, we don't know what's going on. I'm going to venture first of all, let me tell you what the rest of the league thinks. Nothing. To quote a friend of mine who's a general manager in the league, the media and fantasy football cares a lot more about Odell Beckham Jr. than those of us inside the NFL. What does that mean? Why is it that way? Well, he's not the same player he used to be. He makes a ton of money, and yet he's been marginally productive during his time in Cleveland. And frankly, you go back to his last year in New York. When was the last time Odell Beckham Jr. was one of the top wide receivers in football? When was that last moment? And you start to realize when you kind of look back and like, wait a second, OBJ, if you go back, and remember, you're talking to a guy whose dog is named Odell Beckham Jr. Right? Dog is named Odell Beckham Jr. Now, he had 1,000 yards receiving in his last year in New York. He had 1,000 yards receiving his first year in Cleveland. But if you want to be honest and go to that first year in Cleveland, that was the year where they fired their head coach and changed head coaches mid-year, right? That Cleveland team was 6-10. Last year they won, and he barely played. This year they're up and down, and he's played, but hasn't contributed that much. He doesn't look like the same guy physically, and clearly mentally he's not nearly as engaged, and he doesn't think he's getting enough opportunities. I can understand Odell Beckham Jr.'s frustration. I think we all can. I can understand how when mentally you're not in the right headspace, you don't feel like they're bringing out the best in you, how physically you won't play as well. But part of the magic to great professional athletes, to great collegiate, to great athletes is they can push through. They can figure it out. They can make, if I'm a run blocker, I'm going to be the best damn run blocker in the world. If I'm going to be a decoy, I'll be the best decoy in the world. My guess is what the Cleveland Browns are simply doing is that they're changing the power dynamic within the relationship. And this isn't, you have a head coach who, when he was in Minnesota, the exact same thing happened with Stephon Diggs, who had a much better year. Right, remember that. Stephon Diggs won the ball more. They had him and Adam Thielen, and, they ran the football a lot more, so they didn't need two superstar wide receivers. They chose Thielen, and Stephon Diggs has had an outstanding career, maybe even a better career than he could have thought, going to Buffalo. It's the best thing that happened to him. And I'm guessing OBJ will be on the move next year. But the fact that they didn't trade him and now they've shut him down and you have the video, it tells you all you need to know. He was doing everything in his power to get traded. They're pissed and they're like, why are we going to trade you? If we have to trade you, nobody's going to take on your contract. We have to pay for you to play for somebody else. Why are we going to do that? It's a precedent that it sets for anyone in the organization. If you pout, if you complain, if you have your dad post a video, you get sent out of town and you get not only your entire contract, but then there's no offset. You get a new contract as well, even if it's a minimum deal. You actually make more money if you get cut and get re-signed. So we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to have you stay at home, watch everybody else play, and see if we can win without you. What the Browns are doing is just like your high school coach did or your college coach did, where when you screw up, they say, no, you're okay. You go sit there, get a drink. Let's let everybody else run for you. That's what they're doing. We basically have to act like a parent and take away what you love most, which is playing and catching touchdown passes. And we'll figure it out. If we need you, we'll call you. And if we don't, we'll just pay you. And eventually you'll be off our what's it called? Salary cap at the end of the year. That's what I believe they're doing here. So I think there's a million different ways to look at it. But if somebody really believed in Odell Beckham Jr., they can move some stuff around. They can move some draft picks back. The Browns would have paid for him to be in the NFC. Right? If the Saints wanted him in their locker room, they would have reached out. They would have made that happen. If the Rams wanted him, they would have made that happen. If the Niners wanted him, they would have made that happen. If the Packers wanted him, they would have made that happen. But stats without wins are just stats. The first thing you need in order to make it to a professional sport is ability. But there's an expression in basketball that goes like this. Every bad team has a leading scorer. So I don't care how many catches he had on bad teams and bad years. Tell me what he did during the good years, the 1 year they made the playoffs with the Giants. Tell me what he did last year when they made the playoffs with the Browns. Tell me how he impacts winning. And does he drag everybody down when you're losing? The last thing you need when people outside the building are questioning your quarterback is somebody inside the building questioning the quarterback. You don't need it. You can't run an organization that way. You cannot operate that way. And that's what the Browns are doing, and I agree with it. It has nothing to do with his use or whether he's open, how good Baker Mayfield is. I don't care. Never, ever, period. Why don't you sit there in your house and we'll call you if we need you. We're not going to fight. We're not going to pay. You're excused. You still get your check. But we're not going to pay for you to play for somebody else, and we're not going to allow that behavior to exist inside our locker room.